What if the person who smiled at your wedding, handed you tissues when you cried, and called herself your biggest defender, was the very same person who stood in front of 200 people and painted you as a woman without dignity, without boundaries, and without shame? What if that person was your sister? And what if the worst part, the part that still makes your chest tighten even years later, is that she looked you straight in the eye after she did it and she didn't blink? My name is Lindsay, I'm 35 years old and I live in Seattle. And for almost 4 years I carried a lie that my sister Lola planted, nurtured, and fertilized like she was tending a garden of poison. A lie so carefully constructed that it cost me friendships, opportunities, dinner invitations, and the kind of peace you don't even realize you had until it's gone. She told 200 people, 200 family members, neighbors, old friends, and people I'd known since childhood, that I was obsessed with her husband. She didn't whisper it, she didn't hint at it, she announced it, dramatically, at a party, while I was standing close enough to hear the echo of laughter that followed. Stay with me, because this story doesn't end where you think it ends, and I promise you, the last 5 minutes of this video will leave you absolutely speechless. Subscribe now, please subscribe. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this. Let me take you back. Lola is 2 years older than me. Growing up in Seattle, we shared everything. A bedroom until I was 12, a group of friends, the same parents, the same Saturday morning routines, the same dreams about what our lives would look like when we finally grew up. She was the louder one, the one who walked into rooms and rearranged the energy. She had this laugh that people remembered, big, uncontrollable, a little chaotic, and she wore it like a crown. I was quieter, more measured. I liked books and long walks, and I used to say I processed things slowly, like a slow cooker. Everything I felt deeply, but on a delay. People always said we complemented each other. Lola brought the party, Lindsay brought the heart. That's how our mother Marie used to describe us. But what people didn't see, what I was too loyal to say out loud for years, was that Lola also had a competitive streak that ran so deep it practically had its own zip code. It started small, things that individually you could explain away. When I got a promotion at 26 and came home excited about it, Lola announced 2 weeks later that she was starting her own business. When I lost 20 pounds after a hard year and started feeling good about myself again, Lola suddenly joined a fitness program and talked about it constantly. When I cut my hair and got compliments at family dinners, she came in the following week with a new style and managed to steer every conversation toward it. None of that was damning on its own. Siblings compete. It's human. I understood that. I explained it away 100 times. But then she met Jonathan. Jonathan came into Lola's life when she was 29. He was tall, quietly confident, the kind of man who didn't talk much, but when he did, people paid attention. He worked in architecture. He had a dry sense of humor and one of those calm dispositions that made you feel like whatever was happening, it was going to be okay. He was a good man. I want to be very clear about that, because this story isn't about Jonathan. He was good to Lola. He was kind to our family. He was the type of person who remembered your birthday without being reminded, who showed up with the right thing to say when your dog died, who remembered the names of people he'd only met once. I liked Jonathan. I respected him. I enjoyed his company the way you enjoy the company of your sister's husband when your sister is someone you love. That was the entire extent of it. But somewhere in Lola's mind, in that complicated, competitive, fragile place inside her that I didn't fully understand yet, something else was being built, a story, a narrative, a lie that she was even then slowly starting to believe. I didn't know it was happening. That's what haunts me. She was my sister. She called me every week. We had Sunday dinners at our parents' house. She was the maid of honor at our cousin Eliza's wedding, and I was right next to her, laughing and dancing and sharing a bottle of wine. She held my hand when our grandfather died. She sat with me in the parking lot of a hospital for 6 hours when our dad had a health scare, and we talked about everything and nothing, the way sisters do. And the whole time, she was building a case against me in her own head, cataloging moments, reinterpreting glances, turning ordinary interactions into evidence of something that was never there. I had no idea. The party was a celebration. Jonathan's mother, Danielle, had organized it, a garden party at her home in Bellevue for Jonathan's 40th birthday. Danielle was a generous woman, elegant in a down-to-earth way, and she'd gone all out. String lights, catered food, a live musician playing in the corner, about 200 guests, family from both sides, friends, colleagues, neighbors. I was there because I was Lola's sister, because Jonathan's family had welcomed us warmly, because I genuinely liked these people. I wore a blue dress. I remember that specifically because Lola had called me the week before and asked what I was wearing. I told her blue. She said nothing. I didn't think anything of it. When I arrived, she was already there, moving through the crowd the way she always did, magnetic, luminous, her laugh carrying across the yard. She waved when she saw me, smiled, normal. The first hour was fine. I chatted with Jonathan's colleagues, a man named Franklin who worked at his firm, a woman named Bellamy who was Jonathan's college friend. I talked to my cousin Taylor for a while. I had a glass of wine and ate something from the buffet table. And then I was standing with a small group that included a family friend named Walt and his wife, and I was mid-sentence about something completely unrelated when I heard Lola's voice cut across the garden. Loud, deliberate, clear. Oh, Lindsay, she's always had a thing for Jonathan, ever since we got together. It's honestly a little embarrassing for her. The words landed before I even fully processed where they'd come from. Laughter. A few people laughed. Not cruel laughter, the awkward, confused kind, the kind people use when they don't know how else to respond, but laughter. I turned. Lola was standing with a group of about 15 people, some of Jonathan's family, some mutual friends, some people I barely knew. She was smiling, not a nervous smile, a comfortable one, the smile of a woman who had just told a joke that landed. Our eyes met. She held my gaze for 1 second, 2, and then she turned away and kept talking. I stood there in a blue dress in the middle of a garden in Bellevue with 200 people around me, and I felt the ground tilt. What do you do in that moment? I've been asked this question more times than I can count. What did you do? Did you confront her? Did you say something? Did you set the record straight? The answer is that I did what a lot of people do when they're blindsided by someone they trust in public. I froze, and then I smiled, and then I said I needed some water, and I walked away. I found a quiet corner of the garden near the back fence, by a row of rose bushes, and I stood there with my glass and I breathed. I went through the stages fast, disbelief, then a burning embarrassment, then an anger so hot it made my hands shake. My phone buzzed. It was our cousin Taylor texting me. She'd been in the crowd. She wrote, "Are you okay? What was that?" I didn't answer. I didn't know what to say. I stayed at that party for another 45 minutes, long enough to not make a scene, long enough to say goodbye to Danielle and thank her for having me, long enough to hug Jonathan's aunt and tell her the food was wonderful. I did not say a word to Lola. I drove home in silence, parked in front of my apartment building in Seattle, and I sat in my car until almost midnight. And then I cried. Not because of what she'd said, not entirely, but because in one moment, in one cruel, careless sentence, my sister had redefined me for 200 people. And the worst part, the thing I kept circling back to, was that I couldn't understand why. Why would she do that? Why would she say something like that about me? It didn't make any sense. It wouldn't make sense for almost 4 years. Here's what I didn't know about the way lies work. They don't need to be believed completely to do their damage. They just need to be repeated. Over the following months, I started to feel the edges of things shifting. Invitations that didn't come. Group chats that went quiet when I joined. A dinner with Lola's friend group that I'd always been part of, where suddenly I felt like an exhibit rather than a guest. Conversations that stopped half a second too late when I walked into a room. Our mutual friend Morley pulled away first. We'd been close since college, the three of us, me, Lola, and Morley. But around 6 months after that party, Morley started being unavailable. Texts left on read, plans canceled at the last minute, eventually just silence. I called Lola, asked if everything was okay with Morley. "She's just busy," Lola said. "You know how she gets." I believed her, because she was my sister. Jonathan's colleague Franklin, who I genuinely liked and who I'd had a few nice conversations with at family gatherings, started being visibly uncomfortable around me. I noticed it at Christmas that year, how he shifted when I spoke to him, how his eyes darted toward Lola. I started to understand that something was being said. I just didn't know the full scope of it. I confronted Lola directly, about 8 months after the party. I called her on a Sunday morning, my heart hammering, and I said, "Lola, I need to ask you something. What you said at Jonathan's birthday party, about me having a thing for Jonathan, that wasn't true. You know that wasn't true? And I need you to tell me why you said it." There was a pause. And then she laughed. "Lindsay, it was a joke. You're being so dramatic. You always take things so seriously. I was just teasing." It didn't feel like teasing, and other people heard it. Other people know I'm funny. You're the only one who made it a whole thing. I hung up feeling worse than when I'd called. That was a pattern I would learn to recognize later, the way she always managed to make the confrontation become the problem, rather than the thing being confronted. The way I always walked away from those conversations feeling like maybe I was overreacting, maybe I was dramatic. Maybe I was the one with the problem. That's what she did, for almost 4 years. If you have a Lola in your life right now, please subscribe. Your support means everything, and it reminds me, I'm not alone in this. We are not alone in this. Jonathan and Lola's marriage started showing cracks in year 4. I know this not because Lola told me, she stopped telling me anything real by that point, but because our mother Marie mentioned it in passing, and because Danielle, Jonathan's mother, called me out of the blue one afternoon and asked if I was okay. That call from Danielle surprised me. We weren't particularly close, but she was a perceptive woman, and there was something in her voice that I couldn't quite name, a kind of gentle apology wrapped in a wellness check. "I've always thought very highly of you, Lindsay," she said. "I just want you to know that." I didn't know what to do with that at the time. The marriage unraveled slowly, the way they always do. Not a single explosion, but a long series of small fires that eventually merged into something that couldn't be contained. I heard pieces. Their communication had broken down. Jonathan had grown distant. There were arguments about money, about priorities, about the future. I stayed completely out of it, not because I didn't care, but because I had learned by then, hard and painful lesson, that proximity to anything involving Lola's marriage could be used against me. I kept my distance deliberately, carefully, the way you keep your distance from a live wire. I focused on my own life. I had a good job in Seattle. I'd started seeing someone, a quiet, thoughtful man named Cameron, who made me feel safe in a way I hadn't felt in years. I had friends who knew the real me. I had a therapist named Dr. Jane, who helped me understand what had happened, and helped me stop blaming myself for things that weren't my fault. I was okay, not perfect, still hurt, still carrying the weight of 4 years of whispers, but okay. And then everything changed. Lola and Jonathan finalized their divorce on a Thursday in October. Jonathan moved out. Lola kept the house. There were no children involved, which everyone agreed was a mercy given the circumstances. I sent Lola a brief text. Not because I felt obligated. I'd learned by then not to do things out of obligation, but because despite everything, she was still my sister. She was still the girl who'd shared my bedroom until I was 12. She was still the one who'd held my hand in hospital parking lots. "I'm sorry," I wrote. "I know this is hard. I'm here if you need anything." She didn't respond. I didn't push. About 3 weeks later, my phone rang at 11 in the evening. It was Lola. Her voice was different. Not the performance I'd come to expect. Not the careful version she always deployed. Something stripped down, raw. She'd clearly been crying. "Lindsay," she said, "can I come over?" I said yes. She arrived at my apartment in Seattle just after midnight. She looked, and I say this with complete truth, not cruelty, like someone who had been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and had finally accepted that she could not carry it anymore. Her eyes were swollen. Her hands wouldn't quite stay still. I made tea. I sat across from her at my kitchen table, and I waited. She didn't speak for a while. She held the mug and looked at the table. And then she said, "I lied." Just those two words, dropped into the silence of my kitchen like stones into still water. I didn't say anything. I waited. At Jonathan's birthday party, what I said about you being obsessed with him, I made it up. There was never anything there. I knew there was nothing there. I made it up. My hands were very still in my lap. "Why?" I asked. And what came out of her next was something I had not expected, not because the content was unbelievable, but because the honesty was so complete, so unguarded, that it almost didn't sound like Lola. She was jealous of me. Not of anything specific, not of a thing I'd done, or a man I'd taken, or a life I'd stolen, but of me as a concept. Of the version of me that existed in her head, quieter, perhaps more composed, less dramatic, the one who got compliments in the gentle, steady way rather than the bright, overwhelming way Lola always needed. She was jealous of how people looked at me when they thought no one was watching. She was jealous of the fact that Jonathan, before they'd even met, had once mentioned, offhandedly, that he found quiet confidence more attractive than loudness. She'd never forgotten that. She'd turned it into a wound. She was jealous, she said, because she had always felt like she had to perform to be loved, and she had always felt like I was loved without performing, and she didn't know what to do with that feeling. So she had planted a seed. She had taken the things she feared, that Jonathan would see something in me, that people would prefer me, that she would somehow lose, and she had tried to make it grotesque, to turn me into a cautionary tale. To make me the desperate, obsessed sister so that I could never, by contrast, be the better one. And she had kept building on it, quietly, not a campaign, she wasn't organized enough for that, but a drip. A comment here. A knowing look there. A laugh that said what she liked to people who barely knew me. She sat in my kitchen at midnight and told me all of it. And when she was done, she looked up at me with eyes that were entirely bare, and she said, "I'm sorry, Lindsay. I don't expect you to forgive me." I sat with it for a long time. The kitchen was quiet. The city outside was quiet. My hands were still in my lap. I thought about the party in the garden, the rose bushes, the 45 minutes I'd stood there, smiling, while everything around me quietly realigned. I thought about Morley, who had pulled away. I thought about Franklin's uncomfortable eyes. I thought about the dinner parties I hadn't been invited to. I thought about the Sunday morning I'd called her, terrified and trembling, and she'd laughed and called me dramatic. I thought about 4 years. And then I thought about the hospital parking lot where she'd held my hand, about the bedroom we'd shared, about Marie, our mother, who loved us both and had no idea any of this had been happening, about the version of Lola I'd grown up next to, before whatever this was had taken root in her. I didn't forgive her that night. I want to be very clear about that because this is not that kind of story. This is not the story where the wronged person smiles graciously and says it's okay and everyone cries and embraces and the music swells. What I said to Lola that night was this. I hear you. I believe you. And I need you to know what it cost me. I need you to sit here in this kitchen and actually listen while I tell you what 4 years of that lie took from me. Not because I want you to suffer, but because you're going to understand what you did before you leave this table tonight. She nodded. And I told her. I told her about the party, about standing alone by the rose bushes, about driving home in silence, about the nights I lay awake wondering what was wrong with me, why I always seemed to make people uncomfortable, why I kept being quietly edged out of spaces I'd always belonged in. I told her about Morley, about friendships that had grown cold, about the gathering confidence I'd spent years building being slowly, quietly eroded by a story she had decided to tell. I told her about the therapy sessions where I unpacked the ways I'd started doubting myself, my judgment, my social skills, my right to take up space in my own family circles. I talked for almost an hour. She listened. When I was done, she was crying, the silent kind. The kind you cry when you're not performing grief but actually experiencing it. I know, she said, that I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I'm going to spend whatever time it takes making it right. I'm going to tell the truth to the people I told. I'm going to call Morley. I'm going to call Danielle. I'm going to say what I actually said and what was actually true. You have my word. We're not okay right now, Lola. I want you to know that. But I'm not done with you. You're still my sister, and I'm going to need some time. She left around 2 in the morning. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after the door closed, not crying, just sitting, letting the strange, exhausting, devastating, almost holy relief of finally knowing the truth settle over me, like something that had been waiting a very long time to arrive. Justice doesn't always look the way we imagine it will. The self-doubt is not evidence that you're wrong. The confusion is not evidence that you misunderstood. The fact that they laughed and called you dramatic is not evidence that they were right and you were overreacting. You can be wrong about the specifics and still be right about the thing. You can forgive someone and still hold your ground. You can love someone and still refuse to pretend that what they did was fine. You are allowed to be hurt by this. You are allowed to be angry. You are allowed to take your time. And you are allowed to survive it and rebuild and come out the other side still knowing your own name. That's what I know. That's what I carried out of 4 years and a midnight confession and a refrigerator card and 14 months of careful, imperfect, ongoing work. I'm Lindsay, I'm 35. I live in Seattle. And my sister told 200 people I was obsessed with her husband. And she was wrong. And eventually she said so. And I'm still here. If this story stayed with you, please subscribe. Your support means everything, and it reminds me I'm not alone in this, and neither are you. Drop your story in the comments. I read every single one. You are not invisible. You are not dramatic. You are not alone.